Yes, Pravina, the recording has been started. Everyone, the session is being recorded. So yeah, Pravina, please introduce Ranjit sir. Yeah.
Okay, sir. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Good evening, all. A warm and wholehearted welcome to session 4 of the Teachers Development Program, which is a prestigious and ambitious program of the LGRF. And today, first of all, I would like to welcome all the dignitaries of the LGRF who are present here, and all the participants here. And I would like to welcome Ranjit sir, who is the DGM Legal of the Canara Bank, Bangalore. And today's session will be on the subject comparative public law, and on the topic they will be dealing is on the forms of government, presidential and parliamentary, unitary and federal. I welcome you, sir, to this session.
Thank you. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. You are audible. Yeah.
Okay. So good evening, all.
Good evening.
Good evening,
sir.
Rajesh. Yeah. How many contestants are there? Participants in this?
Actually, I believe there are more than 100.
You're not audible. Hello.
Hello. I believe
Yeah.
there are more than 100 registered participants, sir. As of now, there are 33 people who have joined.
Okay. Okay.
Usually, the sessions will start by 5
Actually,
p.m.
Ranjit sir,
Yeah.
actually, good evening. Actually, we selected 40 students
Yeah.
and 40 students, and our 10 editors are also there. Around 50 students are we already selected. But
Okay.
some
Okay.
other LJRF members are also participating in different sessions.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Yes.
So we can start the session. I'll just give a brief outline. Like it's a very elementary or basic subject, that is comparative. If you see comparative law, the form of governments, the type of governments, you see it's a very simple topic which I have been given as the initial class. So basically, I have just given a presentation. Whether I'll share the presentation first. So we are going to the through the forms of government. That is the different types of governments which we are seeing. As you are all aware, there are basically four types. That is presidential, parliamentary, unitary, and federal. We will look into these types individually. First of all, we will see what is the type of government in India. As you are all aware, India has adopted a parliamentary form of government. That is basically after coming from the British rule, when India emerged as a that is a republic country, it has adopted the parliamentary form. So the Constitution of India has adopted the parliamentary form of government, wherein it is, you are aware that the preamble speaks that India is a sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic, and republic. So the federal India is a quasi-federal country which is having unitary features. So there is a question why the constitution makers, they have not adopted the presidential form of government in India. Always there is a doubt on that. So you see why it was not accepted in the presidential system. there is a separation of powers, clear separation of powers between the executive and the legislature. Whereas in parliamentary form, you see it is not that much separated. There is a lot of commonality, or if you see, there are a lot of interlinkages, which we will go when we are going further into the slides. We will be knowing that. The separation of powers between the two branches in India is partial, and the constitution has not put one institution to dominate over the other. So there may be some conflicts if it is separate. So those things have been taken care when the constitution has been adopted. See, the governance in India, if it is, if you see that at the central level, the President of India is the constitutional head. The Prime Minister of India is the head of the Council of Ministers, and he is heading the Council of Ministers. So it functions like this: the Council of Ministers and the Prime Minister will be advising the President for governing. So that is the system which is being followed in India at the central level. If you see the state level also, as I have told, it is not a fully unitary system, it is a federal system. So India has central government as well as the state governments. So state level, we have the governor at the top, who is advised by the chief minister and the council of ministers. We will go to the first type of governance, that is the parliamentary form of government. I have given the characteristics of what is the characteristics of a parliamentary form. Dual executive, that is one characteristic. Then you have the collective responsibility, the individual responsibility, close relationship between executive and legislature, political homogeneity, and the secrecy of procedure. So you see the dual executive. What is meant by dual executive? You may be aware that the parliamentary form of government always speaks about one executive who is the head of the state, and he is a nominal or a titular executive. That means that he doesn't enjoy the real power. It's only nominal power, or he has been given that title. He has got it either as a hereditary form, or he has been elected, and that nominal form, executive, nominal post is being created. So in dual executive form, you have the real executive who is actually executing the or enjoying the powers, and the nominal or the titular executive. So the head of the state, that is the nominal executive, is considered as the head of the state. If you see India as an example, the president is the head of the state. He is enjoying all the powers and privileges of the constitution that has been given. But whether he is actually exercising it, no. Actually, it is being exercised by the real executive. Who is the real executive? The real executive is the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister, supported by the Council of Ministers. You go to UK. Who is the nominal executive? Is the Queen or the King. He or she is the titular head, and the Prime Minister is the real head. If you see Article 74 of the Constitution of India, it speaks that there shall be a council of ministers with the Prime Minister at the head to aid and advise the President, who shall in exercise of his functions act in accordance with such advice. So always the President is nominal. He has to accept the what are the advices given by the Prime Minister and the Council of Ministers. But there is one exception, that there is one opportunity given to the President, whether he can he has to act or not. If he is not happy with that, he can send it back once to the Prime Minister and the Council of Ministers, and once they are again sending it back, that is, once the President is sending it back to the Council of Ministers for reconsideration, and if the same thing is again sent back, the President has to accept it. So Article 74 of the Constitution speaks about it. So the dual executive is one of the characteristics of the parliamentary form, where there is a nominal head, there is a real executive, nominal executive, and real executive. The real executive will be getting the things done through the nominal executive. The nominal executive has to accept the advice of the real executive. Second aspect, what I want to discuss is collective responsibility. The parliamentary form of government, there is a collective responsibility of the executive. Like the parliament is collectively responsible to the legislature. That is, once a decision is taken by the cabinet, it becomes the responsibility of each minister to support it in and outside the parliament. See Article 75(3) of the Constitution. So, if a cabinet is taking a decision in respect of a particular department or anything, and a decision, cabinet decision has already been taken, tomorrow the one minister cannot go out and tell that I am not supporting it, because it is a collective decision. So there is a collective responsibility arising out of the collective decision. So that is required for maintaining the stability of the government. What is the consequence of that? That is, if any no confidence motion is passed by the parliament against a single minister while pursuing a cabinet policy, it will be considered as to be a vote of no confidence against the whole cabinet, and the cabinet has to tender its resignation. So the no confidence motion passed by the parliament against a cabinet policy, against a single minister who is pursuing a cabinet policy, if it is passed, then the government will be bound by that. There comes the individual responsibility also. That is, each ministry is individually responsible to the parliament for the administration of his own department. If you see in history, 1962, there is a China invasion in 1962 of India. And Mr. V.K. Krishna Menon, who was the foreign minister of that time, he has accepted the individual responsibility and resigned. See, parliamentary form of government, there is one important characteristic is the executive and legislature are closely interlinked. There is a close relationship between the members of the executive and the legislature. The members of the executive should be the members of the legislature also. In India, you know, the governing party, the governing the government will be the party who is enjoying the majority in the elections. So it is not that you can select some separate people who will be the executive and the legislature will be separate. No, the legislature will become the executive. How? Because the majority party will get the opportunity to form the government. The leader of the party who is enjoying the majority will be called by the president to form the government. Likewise in central as well as in state. State government also is the governor calls the party, the leader who enjoys the majority, state elections. So the members of the executive should be members of the legislature. That is one interlinking a relationship between the executive and legislature. In case if anyone is not a member, you have seen so many cases where some people have been made the minister and subsequently they will be standing for election somewhere else because they have to become the member of the legislature. They should get themselves elected to the legislature within a stipulated period as envisaged. Otherwise, they will cease to become a member of the executive. So the members of the cabinet, obviously when this happens, the members of the cabinet take part in the law-making process also. Because they are a part of the legislature, they will be making the law, and they will be a part of the executive by becoming part of the government and the cabinet. And you see, one important feature of the parliamentary form is that the cabinet or the executive should enjoy the confidence of the parliament. Always, it's like I have already told. Yeah, tell me.
Sir, slide has not been changed, sir.
Now it is coming?
Yeah, it's the first slide which is visible now.
No, here it is being changed.
But here we can see only the first slide, sir. Yeah, it's okay, sir. Now it's okay.
Okay. Now you can see the change of slides.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Should I repeat it or can I move to this slide?
So you can move, sir.
Okay. So I was talking about the relationship between the executive and the legislature. As I have told, the members of the executive should be members of the legislature. So the one important feature, what I have seen, what we are seeing in this parliamentary form of government is that the cabinet will be in office only till the legislature or it enjoys the confidence of the parliament. So the cabinet is a member of the legislature, and if the legislature or the parliament is voting them out in a no confidence motion or anything, the cabinet will not be continuing in power. So this interlinking of this executive and the legislature in the parliamentary form of government is an important characteristic, because this is considered as a vital part, because the legislature and the executive are interlinked, and the legislature's control over the executive is in this area. There is a form of political homogeneity you see in this parliamentary form of government, because obviously the members of the cabinet will be belonging to the same political party. Usually they are taken from the majority party in the legislature. But in India, you have seen so many cases where a coalition government is formed. So sometimes because it becomes a separate front, one group will be standing as a separate front and forming a coalition government. And in England, such governments are called national governments. Parliamentary form of government speaks about, makes it important that the secrecy of procedure has to be maintained. That is, a minister should not divulge in the public or anywhere else whatever is discussed in the cabinet. And any violation of this is serious. As you are all aware, the leadership of the Prime Minister is, I have described it in the initial characteristic, that is dual leadership, like dual this executive situation is there in the parliamentary form. That is, one is a nominal head and another is a real head. So Prime Minister is the real head of the real head or the real executive. So he is the acknowledged leader of the parliamentary form of government. Usually the leader of the majority party in the lower house of the legislature is appointed as the Prime Minister. He is the leader of the house and he has overall control over the cabinet. On his recommendations, other ministers are being appointed. So once what happens after the election, the majority party leader is called for forming the government by the president, who is the nominal head. So the nominal head is calling the real head or the real executive, and he forms the government. And then the nominal head will be has to act as per the advice given by the real executive and the council of ministers. So this is the basic structure or the basic concept of the parliamentary form. You see this parliamentary form usually in the British system, that is the Westminster system. That is, they were the first to adopt this type of governance. The executive is made of the members of the legislature. So one important characteristic is the executive made out of the members of the legislature. The executive is responsible to the legislature. As you are all aware, I have discussed that the executive can be thrown out of power if they are not enjoying the confidence of the legislature. There will be parliamentary opposition parties. That is, the leader of the majority party will be the real executive, and the parliamentary opposition parties will always be there in the parliament. Ceremonial head of the state is different from the head of the government. See, ceremonial head in UK, there is the queen or the king, and it will be different from the head of the government. Head of the government is the prime minister. Usually it is followed in Australia, Canada, Singapore, New Zealand, etc. So the parliamentary form, this speaks about this. These are the basic characteristics of the parliamentary form. if you see, I'll just reiterate, there is dual executive. I've told the president and the prime minister, nominal head, real executive, and nominal executive. The real executive will be carrying over the, he will be advising the nominal head or the president to carry out the functions. Collective responsibility, it is the collective responsibility of the cabinet. A decision taken by the cabinet will be binding on the members of the cabinet, and if it is being challenged, then the cabinet has to take the responsibility and move out. Individual responsibility, there is an individual responsibility also on the members of the cabinet, that they have to take responsibility of whatever is happening in respect of their department, and they have to move out. Close relationship between executive and legislature, this is the one of the main characteristics. I think this first one and the fourth one are very important, because these are the main characteristics. The close relationship between executive and legislature, that is, executive is taken out from the legislature only. That is, legislature, the members of the legislature will be acting as the executive also. If you are not a member of the legislature, you have to get become a member of the legislature by following the due procedure as enunciated under law. And there is a time frame also for that. Political homogeneity, that is, usually the executive will be members of the same political party, or at least members of the same front where they are following the same ideology or the same policies. So this is also required for the stability of the government. Then secrecy of procedure, that is, procedures, whatever is being followed should be, it should not be divulged. It should be made confidential. We'll go to the presidential form of government. Parliamentary form I have discussed. Presidential form of government. Presidential form of government basically speaks about these characteristics, that is, separation of powers. Then there is a single executive. There is a fixed term of the president, and there is a preeminence of the president. Usually, we will see here a typical example of the presidential form is the United States of America, where they exercise this presidential form. One of the, like in a parliamentary form, the legislature and executive were interlinked. That is, the legislative members, the members of the legislature, where they only can become the part of the executive. Whereas in presidential form, there is a clear demarcation or the separation of powers. The executive and legislature are separate and have equal status. You see, the executive, who is headed by the president and the secretaries. In India, we have the cabinet, council of ministers or the cabinet. Here, the president and the secretaries are the cabinet members. The secretaries and president, they are not members of the legislature. They are not into the law-making process. So what will happen is the president can elect the secretaries, and they are not into this legislation part. So they are not bound by the legislature. Like tomorrow, the cabinet, for any cabinet decision, you cannot throw out the executive or the government by giving any no confidence motion, moving any no confidence motion. So that is one disadvantage, or rather an advantage, because there is a stability also. Stability factor also in this, because usually when you see in parliamentary form in India, if you take the history during some period in the 90s, I think there were a lot of governments formed, and each year. So what happened, because the president, the cabinet, the executive was responsible to the legislature, and any change in the majority used to throw out the government. But here, the president will serve the fixed term, tenure, until and unless he is being impeached and thrown out. So the legislature and executive are entirely different. They are not connected. They are not a part of each other. You cannot throw out the executive by moving any no confidence motion. So how they control? They control usually by see, always the power of the purse depends on the how you are controlling the funds which because the legislation is being made and the executive has to execute the legislation. So usually there is a manipulation and control of the action of one group by the other by making legislations, different types of legislations to restrict the powers, to allow the use of funds like that. So even though it is separate, they have to exercise some sort of influence over the other to get things done. See, the legislature, how the legislature is having a power over the executive. It is not like in parliamentary form, but there is a limited power which is exercised by the legislature over the executive. That is impeachment motion. If you can use the impeachment power, but it is very cumbersome. So it is not as easy as the no confidence motion, but impeachment process has to be followed to throw out the executive or the executive head who is the president. Obviously, the Supreme Court has the power to declare the laws passed by the legislature and orders of the president as unconstitutional. As I have discussed, the presidential form of government speaks about a single executive. Who is that? The president, who is the head of the state as well as the government. So this single executive, he is the executive. That is, he is a real executive and he is not a nominal head if you compare with the parliamentary form. Because parliamentary form has a nominal head and a real executive, whereas in presidential form, it is a single executive, not the dual executive. So that is one comparative feature. If you see in parliamentary form, there is a dual executive. Here it is a single executive. So the real executive, who is the president, he enjoys the real power of administration. And he exercises all the powers given to him by the constitution and the law. The presidential form of government, you see the president has to continue for a fixed term. If you see in parliamentary form, the cabinet, the prime minister and the cabinet can continue for a fixed term. However, they are accountable to the legislature also. Whereas in presidential form, the president can continue for a fixed term until there is an impeachment that happens for violation of the constitution. So you cannot remove him other than that process. Presidential form of government gives preeminence to the president. The president occupies the position of preeminence in the system of government. The members of the president's cabinet, who are the secretaries, are his subordinates. It's like appointing my secretaries. That's why it's called secretary only. Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, Secretary of Foreign Affairs. So it's like, it's not a minister. It is not a colleague. He is only a subordinate to him. The secretaries help the president in the administration. What is their role is, it is not that they are taking any decision. They have to give an advice to the president, and president is the single executive who will be executing the decisions, and the secretary's decisions or the advice can be accepted or rejected by the president. So president enjoys the primary or the most power of the executive. As I have told, USA, Brazil, and some countries of South America are using this presidential form of government. Other than this parliamentary form and this presidential, we have seen some forms of government across the world, which is having some features of both. That is parliamentary as well as presidential. I'll just discuss some 2-3 systems or types which we have seen. One is in France, we see the semi-presidential form of government. See here, this system of semi-presidential system or dual executive system is where the president exists along with the prime minister and the cabinet. So the president is there, the prime minister and the cabinet is also there. The prime minister and the cabinet is responsible to the legislature. So what is the difference between the semi-presidential form? If you see, compare it with the parliamentary form. Here, the head of the state, who is the president, is a popularly elected figure, popularly elected person who will be having more powers rather than a nominal head. See, in parliamentary form, the president is the nominal head or the nominal executive. He is not having any powers as per the system. Whereas in semi-presidential form, the president also enjoys some sort of, the head of the state, he enjoys some sort of powers. If you see the presidential system and the semi-presidential system, what is the difference? In presidential system, the president is not responsible to the legislature. The president cannot be removed by the legislature by moving any no confidence motion. He can only be removed through an impeachment process. Whereas in this semi-presidential form, the president can be removed because he is responsible to the legislature. In France, they are following the semi-presidential system as mentioned in the French constitution. And the constitution provides for separation of powers also. So France follows a semi-presidential form of government. Another government which follows this, another country which follows the semi-presidential form is Sri Lanka. You have seen president of Sri Lanka is both head of the state and head of the government and of a multi-party system. See, just compare with the Indian system or a parliamentary system. The president is the nominal head. The prime minister is the real executive or the real head. But in Sri Lanka, the president is the head and the prime minister is the deputy to the president. So the executive power is used by the president on the advice of the prime minister and the cabinet of ministers. And the legislature power is vested with the parliament. So the president is elected for a 5-year term. He is head of the state, head of the government, and commander-in-chief of the armed forces. But he is responsible for the parliament to exercise his duties under the constitutional law. So here he forms a parliamentary form, like he is responsible to the parliament. And the other side, and he can be removed by the parliament by taking the putting it for vote, and 2/3 of vote of the parliament can remove the president, and they have to take the concurrence of the Supreme Court. The president also appoints and heads a cabinet of ministers responsible to the parliament. So he forms a part of the real executive also. In India, the real executive is the prime minister and the nominal executive is the president. Here, there is no such segregation. The president is the real executive and the prime minister also there, who is the deputy to the president. It's a mixed version of both the president and the presidential system and the parliamentary system. Russia also follows the same, follows a pattern, like it's like a semi-presidential form. He is the president of Russia, is the head of the state, and a multi-party system is also there, with executive power is exercised by the government headed by the prime minister. The president is also the head. He is not a nominal head. He is having the power, and there is a to see whether the prime minister and the his council or the ministers are there, that they will be forming an executive also. So the prime minister is appointed by the president with parliament's approval. So prime minister is also there, president is also there, but president is the head of the state and multi-party system. He is enjoying the power. That is the difference. The legislative power is vested in the 2 houses of the Federal Assembly of the Russian Federation, while the president and the government issue numerous legally binding bylaws. So we have discussed about the parliamentary system, the presidential system, and the semi-presidential forms of government, which are found in different parts of the world. But if you see, you can also categorize these type of governments into 2 types. That is, if you see, depending on the nature of the governance, like in a country where a single government is controlling the total territory of the government of the country, or the country is divided into separate parts, separate regions, and there are separate governments for each region. Then there is a central government who is controlling all the total territory of the country. So these two types of systems are also there. So we have again segregated the type into unitary government and federal government. You see, unitary government is where there is only a single government. Single government means there is only an integrated system of government, which the central government is consisting of a legislature and the executive exercise powers over the territory of the entire state. Here, if you see, the total country will have only one government, and that government will be controlling the total country. So here, obviously, what happens is there is a concentration of power. The supreme power belongs to the central government. So there is a concentration of power, and the concentration of power is the basis of a unitary government. There is no distribution of powers. The different places in the country will not have any powers or any. There will not be any division into separate territories as such. The administrative units are at the mercy of the center. The administrative units which are created under the unitary government, they don't have any constitutional existence. You see in India, in the Constitution of India, you see there is a central government, there is a state government, there is a different administrative units. They are given constitutional validity, constitutional existence. Whereas in unitary government, such type of bifurcation or division of powers will not be there. There will not be any distribution of powers. The whole power will be controlled by the unitary government, who is controlling the whole country as a whole. So the administrative units created under the unitary government have no constitutional existence. It is only an arms of the government. The government is using the machinery to govern the country. So the different administrative units, they don't have a constitutional existence because you don't find it in the constitution. That is all machineries to help or support the unitary government. You will have a written or unwritten constitution. There is no requirement of any written constitution for the unitary government. See, example of a unitary government, you can see UK, United Kingdom, where there is an unwritten constitution. Netherlands have a written constitution. So Netherlands is having a written constitution. UK is having a you have an unwritten constitution. So there is no stipulation or requirement that the constitution should be written. You can have an unwritten constitution also. The logic behind this is why it is not required. Why? Because since you don't have different administrative levels where there is a distribution of powers, the question of conflict of interest will not come. Like if a state government and the central government, they are legislating on the same subject, there is a conflict. See, here there is no such bifurcation or different governments existing at different levels. There is only a single government. So even if it is unwritten, you can run the government because there will not be conflict. The administrative units functioning in different levels doesn't have a constitutional existence, and they cannot be considered as a constitutional entity. So that is why the written constitution is not mandatory. And constitution is flexible also. It need not be rigid. As I told, when you have different governments ruling in central and state level, then you have always this issue. The conflict will be coming, and there should be a written document to interpret and find out what is the solution for that. There is no requirement of that. The constitution can also be made flexible. The legislature is the supreme one in a unitary system. There is one supreme legislature which is there. You don't have different legislatures at different levels, like central level and state level. And single citizenship, obviously, you have a unitary government, there is only one citizenship, that is the citizenship of the whole country. So there is a single citizenship is there, single government is there, concentration of power, that is always with the center. Then administrative units are only to support the center, and there is no constitutional existence for that administrative units. It can be changed at any time. That is the importance of that. Then you don't require a written constitution, can be written or unwritten. Then flexibility of the constitution need not be rigid. Supremacy of the legislature and single citizenship. These are main features of the unitary government. If you go to the federal government, here you see there are two sets of government which are coexisting. So it is like one government is there at the center, another government at the state level. Usually this is being used in large countries, big areas, countries where having large territories, where it may not be possible for a single government to carry out the function. Like in United States is an absolute example of a federal government. India is a quasi-federal. It is not fully federal, but it has the features of the federal government. So if you see the United States, each state has a governor and her government. You see so many cases, the governor has the power over the president of the country in US. The governor can make laws, and only when there is a federal issue, like the president has some powers as per the constitution to declare some issue as a federal issue, and then they can take over. So you have the federal investigation team, you have the state level investigation team, and you have each state is having different constitutions. They have different citizenship. So federal government is like a group of small countries which have some they have their own internal governance systems, heads, and the group is being controlled by a central government. So there are two sets of government coexisting. So the coexistence of two sets of governments is one of the most important feature of a federal government. You see, in each federal state, there is a central government and one government in each of the constituent units. So the central and the state governments have the right to promulgate laws and run the administration. So there are different areas where the central and state governments can make laws. The division of power is not similar in all cases. The United States and Australia follow one pattern, but Canada and India follow another pattern. So how obviously I have told you earlier also, when there is a conflict of interest, there is a powers are being divided. How it is being divided? So always when the powers are given to different levels, they have to legislate on those areas only. The constitution of federal state should be written and rigid. Why it is required? As I have told you, in the unitary government it is not required. It is not mandatory. Written is not mandatory. In federal state it is mandatory because there are powers being given to the center and the state, or the central government is given some powers, state government is given some powers. So what is the document which gives you a clear picture? What is the power of the center? What is the power of the state? So that requirement is met when you have a written constitution, which should be rigid also. It should not be that flexible, because you have different governments and the governments may be of different parties. If it is the same political party, okay. If it's a different party, then there should not be any chance given for interpreting the same in different ways to support their political agenda or the interest. So that is why, to keep the federal structure, you should have a written and rigid constitution which should enumerate the powers of the central government and of the constituent units. The central government should have certain powers. state government should have certain powers, and that should be written and should be very clear. So any conflict comes, you should take the document, take the constitution, show them these are the powers of the center, these are the powers of the state. So the conflict can be settled. Every federal constitution must be rigid to the extent that its federal character cannot be changed. You cannot change the federal character. So tomorrow, any change of government should not change the structure or the nature of the. So that is why it's one of the basic structure. It should be made. See, the constitution is a primary factor in this federal government, because as I have told you, that is a document which holds the federal structure. If it is not very clear, it is not, if it is ambiguous, it is not describing the powers, or such cases, what will happen is the nature of the government will change. Sometimes the power, the central government will be more powerful. It will usurp the powers of the state. It will take over. It may change. The federal structure or the federal nature will change to a unitary form. So that should not happen. The constitution is the supreme in this. The constitution of a federal state is the supreme law of the land. So the center and the units obey the constitution and have full faith in the same. Any act violating the constitution is declared as illegal. So the constitution, you see, in United States, the president can be impeached for any violation of the constitution. So you see, the constitution is the supreme in United States, even though the president is the real executive or the executive, single executive. So the single executive, he is bound by the constitution, and any change in the constitution, any violation of the provisions of the constitution will obviously lead to the impeachment of the president. So that is why that power is given, because the constitution is kept in the given the supremacy in this federal nature. You have the supremacy of judiciary, because in a federal system of government, obviously conflicts will be there. Conflicts will be there, and when there is a conflict, you have to take the law and interpret it, and to see how it can be settled. In unitary government, this issue will not be there, because there will not be any constitutional conflicts between the center and the units, because administrative units are not having any constitutional existence. Whereas in this federal government, you have the center and the state level units, and obviously there will be conflicts, and it can be settled only through interpretation of the constitution, which will be done by the judiciary. So judiciary is having a supreme position as far as the federal government is concerned. You have the double citizenship. As you see, the state level person is having a citizenship, and the country also is having. You don't see it in India, but you see that in US. Equal representation of the units in the upper house of the central legislature is considered to be a characteristic of a federation by some scholars. See, when you have the upper house in the central legislature, it should have the representation of the units also, so that any legislation made at the central level should be with the mandate of the state level units also. So constituent units, they should have a share in the amendment of the constitution. As in the earlier slide I have mentioned, the federal nature should be made a basic structure that should be rigid. You should not change it. So the constituent units, when you change the federal structure, who is losing the power? The state level, the individual units which are coming under the central legislature. The state level units will lose the power. So this representation of the constituent units in the upper house or the lawmaking process, lawmaking body, that will be a checkpoint to ensure that their rights are protected. So in a federation, the constituent units should have a share in the amendment of the constitution. You cannot amend the constitution unless and until the constituent units also are supporting that. no amendment is to be given effect without the consent of the central legislature and the legislatures of the constituent units. That is a checkpoint. The federal nature should not be changed. Once you change the federal nature, the power of the constituent units will be lost. So this requirement of consent of the central legislature and the legislatures of the constituent units, that is a requirement to protect the federal nature also. As I have discussed about the unitary form, federal form, just see what is the federal structure in India. India is a federal, India has adopted the federal features, even though you cannot consider it as a totally federal in nature, because it is usually it is referred to as a quasi-federal. It is not fully federal. So what is the difference? What is the uniqueness of the federal structure in India? See, we have a federal structure of government with two sets of government, that is the central and state governments. The Constitution of India has provided for division of powers between the central and states. Now, the division of powers comes. How the powers are being divided? You know, there are powers given to the central government, powers given to the state government. How it is being bifurcated, divided? You all will be aware that the Constitution envisages three lists, that is the union list, the state list, and the concurrent list. The central government make laws on the items enlisted in the union list. That will be major, the issues which will be concerning the, what do you call, the sovereignty of the India. So that is issues of national importance. As for example, it is defense, armed forces, foreign affairs, currency, etc. The state governments are given the powers regarding the what do you call, the regarding the local area, like to keep the law and order of the area, for the education of the place, education of the people in that their area. So basically, those items are enumerated in the state list, and that will be, as I have told, local interest areas such as public order, police, education, forest, etc. There are some areas where both the state and central government can make laws. It is called the concurrent list. The residuary powers are not mentioned in the union, state, and concurrent list. That will be vested with the Lok Sabha. See, the federal structure in India, when you compare with a typical, an ideal federal government, if you see, one difference is you don't have the double citizenship in India, and there are some the central government and the state government, the separation of the powers, or the, that is not very clear. Like not very clear means that is not in US. If you see, the central government is functioning very differently, and the state government is having a different power. Like they have a different independent system. They have their independent constitution and all things. In India, you don't have those things. The control is more. The central government has a more control if you compare with an ideal federal government. So basically, these are the areas which I wanted to cover today. And if you go through these different forms, it's all very elementary, and it's very, what do you call, not very complicated also. Only thing is you have to have a clear and specific view regarding the characteristics of each type, which will help you in segregating what is the type of government which is followed, what is the type of governance which is being followed in different countries. You always see that you can see that in US, where the federal federal government is being used, and the presidential system is being used. And you see UK, where the parliamentary and unitary form. You take these two as examples, and you can find out the differences or how it is being, how the governance varies from these two types. Because other countries, they have taken a mix of these. They have taken what you call a different version of these things, made some tweaks and changes in their systems, and they have adopted it. But if you see some ideal form of this parliamentary form or presidential form or federal or unitary, these two governments will be type of governments will be helpful. So this is what I wanted to discuss now. Any further?
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. It was a very informative session, sir.
Thank you.
Participants, if you have any questions, you can raise it now. If you have any questions, please.
Actually, this is my first session. Actually, I was not giving any lectures for so many years, because after joining the bank, I used to go for this banking related classes also. But the close association with our Safi and team, I also wanted, because I had a passion for teaching, and I had ventured into this. So I think I thank all of you for giving a patient hearing of what my presentation. My friend Rajesh.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, sir. We are grateful that in spite of your busy schedule, you have spent this much of valuable time with us. We are thankful to you, sir.
Thank you, and you can also suggest anything you want to elaborate or any change in the my taking the classes. If you want any changes or anything, you can always give me the feedback. I can improve on that.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank
we
you.
could understand it more better. It was so simple, sir.
Yeah. And thanks for giving me a simple topic also.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. All the participants, thank you so much for your patience and support and cooperation throughout the session. Once again, I thank all of you. Before leaving, to note, we have next session on 10th of April, Saturday, by Dr. Lovelman, sir, Assistant Professor, Government Law College, Kozhikode, on the subject intellectual property rights. So once again, on behalf of LGRF and TDP, I thank all of the participants as well as Ranjit sir for your presence throughout the session. Thank you, sir. Thank you once again.
Thank you. Thanks. Thank you.